I remember one day riding in the taxi, feeling like I reached a point where I could really fluently share the gospel in Thai, and I'm praying and I'm sharing the best I think I've ever shared, and finish sharing some testimony in the gospel. And I'm waiting for this taxi driver to respond, and he responds and he says, "Godi, sasana tuk sasana son hai kon bin kon di," which translates to, "Oh, that's great. Religion, all religions teach people to do good, so all religions are good." And I just thought, oh, it's just water off a duck's back. That just made absolutely no impression on him whatsoever. I started realizing that my skin color was working against me. My nationality was working against me. There were a lot of things where I was just written off and really not listened to when it came to sharing my faith with non-believers. At the same time, when I would come and talk to believers, welcome to the Field Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bob McNabb, and with me today, I'm excited to have my co-host, Scott Lundy, who lives and leads from the Middle East, and our special guest, we have Greg Nicholson, who has lived in Thailand for the last 35 years and serves with Mesa Global. Greg, it's exciting to have you on. We've been friends for more than that time and got to actually serve together, so it's exciting to now be able to do the podcast together.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you, Bob. Excited about today.
Yeah, especially a topic we have today. I really think this could be a game changer for a lot of people. We're talking about strategy, because if you have a strategy that's just not working, I don't care how healthy your team is. It's not fun. When you're banging your head against the wall, it's not moving forward. And so we want teams to be healthy, but we also want them to thrive and to make progress in their ministry. And so strategy does matter. So we're going to talk today. Man, there's so many different strategies that people are trying out, and that's great. But so many times they're debatable. You get people pushing back on each other's strategies and all. But today we're going to be talking about one strategy or observation I've never heard anybody debate. There seems to be almost universal agreement on this. And that is, whenever possible, if you can come alongside and help nationals do the work, that's usually so much more fruitful than just jumping in and doing the work yourself. And so we're going to unpack that some today. But I've never heard anyone say, no, foreigners can really do the work better. That might be the case somewhere, but very rarely. And so let's talk about that, because you know what? This is not the day of William Carey. Things have changed. And now we have opportunities and privileges that we didn't have a couple hundred years ago. And that should impact our strategy. So let's talk about that. Greg, I'll start off with you. How would you describe the ministry that you've had over the last 35 years and what a catalytic, equipping, focused strategy is?
I would say what I started off doing and how I ended was very different. And it evolved as I learned and grew, and never got it perfect, but I definitely changed the strategy that I had. In the latter years, worked more as a catalyst, which I would say is a person who comes with a heart to serve and who comes alongside the nationals, who envisions for what God could do in their nation. It creates opportunities or reveals opportunities around them, looks for key leaders in a city where God is already working, and then comes alongside that key leader and tries to help them do it better, encourage them, walk with them, and help them.
Yeah, that's good. And full disclosure here, Greg and I were on a team together, and we went to Thailand, and I fearlessly led that team into doing a strategy that I would not recommend today.
Yeah, you're the reason you're the reason I went on the mission field. Bob discipled me in college, and we've been great friends since our Sanford days. So
well, I'm one of
we've all grown.
Yeah, so we had this vision. Initially, we thought, hey, let's try to reach out and work with some local churches. And we gave that kind of I wouldn't call it half-hearted at the time, but I'll just say this. We tried, and we were very quickly dissuaded when us, hey, we need more churches. You should just plant some churches. And so we really, I don't feel like we pushed in enough and tried to understand enough and we didn't give it the energy that I would encourage people to give today. So anyway, we have not always lived out the strategy that we're suggesting for many people today. But Scott, I know that you have worked in this kind of ministry yourself, and so I'd just love to hear how you would describe your ministry and your approach now.
Bob, I think it's been unique for me in my position in the Middle East because there's not a plethora of churches, and the number of healthy what I would consider truly healthy churches, even smaller percentage. So it's hard sometimes to find national partners, and there's some unique circumstances in this region. And sometimes it may sound like I'm the devil's advocate on this. It's because of my context. I do believe that a local culture or near culture, so someone from a country, or maybe you're focusing on a specific tribe and there's another tribe in the country that maybe speaks a different language, because there's so many cultural things that they already know about that we're just blind to. So I do think if you're trying to think of an entry strategy or how do we engage a certain population, your first question should be, are there nationals or in culture or near culture people to partner with? And then you're discipling people that are already believers. You're not starting from zero. You're starting with some people that already believe in the Bible. Yeah, there's so much things that have spiritually, but also culturally. It really speeds up your process.
Yeah, that's been my observation for sure.
Yeah.
Greg, how did you personally come to embrace this strategy of coming alongside national leaders?
Yeah, and I just echo what Scott said. I think we have to understand the context that I've worked in for 35 years. Thailand, missionaries have been there, Protestant missionaries 200 years almost, and Catholic missionaries for 300 years. So you come into a situation like that, even though it's 93% Buddhist, 6% Muslim, less than 1% Christian, that's the context that I worked in. So there was an established church, and there was an evangelical fellowship of Thailand. And that's the context where I worked. But like you said earlier, we presented to a church and a group of Thai leaders. And I don't think we realized at that point that the Thais were probably scared of us. They were afraid that, okay, this 10 or 11 foreigners are going to come into our church, and then they'd seen churches split. And so they were like, just go somewhere else. And we've already had our problems with the other American group or the Koreans. And so they gently guided us somewhere else. But I would say, yeah, after doing campus ministry, evangelism, discipleship on the college campus for 14 years, I changed organizations. And my boss with Mesa Global said, hey, why don't you go interview the Thai leaders and ask them what they think missionaries should be doing, because we've been here almost 200 years and we still less than 1% Christian. Maybe there's something we're doing wrong. And that was brilliant. And so I went around and interviewed different leaders, and one of the seminary presidents, he said, the missionaries would come to us here at the seminary and they'd say, will you send us someone to help us start our denomination here in Thailand? And there's the Finnish Free or the Korean Presbyterians or the Canadian Pentecostal. He said, we'd send some people out to do that. Some people would say, we want to start our mission organization. Could you help us start the one I worked for then, Campus Outreach or Campus Crusade or World Vision or whatever? So we'd send people to help them start. And then some people just say, we want to start a church. Can you send me someone from our seminary? And he said, we would do that. He said, but we're at a different place now. We have Thais that are very qualified, who have a vision of their own. Instead of the Thais helping the missionary accomplish their vision, we need the missionaries to at least come alongside or maybe even underneath our Thai leaders. And bam, it just exploded in my mind. It was, wow. And I said, what could I do? And that started my journey into working with the Thais in a lot closer way.
Yeah. I think that was our problem when we approached, I agree with what you just said, when we approached the churches and said, hey, we'd like to work together with you, they were not the problem. Our approach was the problem. We just didn't understand the nuanced way to do that in the right posture and all of that. And so I think we could have walked away and said, the church doesn't want to work with anybody for that. And that wouldn't have been true. Because our approach was poor, and we had to learn later about how to have a better approach. The one you just described that you came back with later of coming in and asking the question, how can we serve? How can we help you succeed at your goals? But Scott, I wonder with you, was there a moment or a turning point for you when you realized that empowering nationals could be a more effective way of doing ministry than just doing it yourself?
I would say it's hard to just nail down one specific, oh, it was at this conference or it was at this event. It's more like a long journey I've been on. And as I mentioned earlier, the context I'm in is quite challenging. But I would say I ran this training program for a couple of years for new people, an equipping team, people coming to doing language, helping them get culture, and then we release them and send them out back to their orgs or whatever. And one of the guys that was on the Best Evangelist, I followed up with him maybe 2-3 years after he finished with us and was talking to them because they were having some fruit. If you sent him out, he would find people to talk to. And if there was no one out there, he'd talk to a telephone pole. He's just out there. He was like, we spent hours and hours, weeks and weeks, months and months trying to be out there amongst the people to find someone who's interested. And you can't find them. And so what they did, they went and networked with all the different orgs and anybody in the country that had believers. And they interviewed 200, what we'd say MBBs, Muslim background believers, so Muslims that had come to faith. They interviewed 200 of them to say, hey, tell us about your story. How did you come to faith? What was important to you? What was it that caused you to want to follow Jesus in light of your background? And as they did that survey, the very last question they asked them was, would you be open to helping your community, your network, your tribe, whatever, to advance the kingdom amongst your people? Would you have any vision for being a part of seeing this spread beyond you? And out of the 200, only one said yes. So they couldn't find people that are interested, just in the general population. They got 200 people that are following Christ, but only 1 out of 200 was like, yeah, I'm willing to go out there. But that one guy, he turned out to be like the Saul that became a Paul. And that's when I realized their strategy changed from going out just trying to find my own frontline to evangelize and disciples. Like, what if we work with this guy who's already a believer, gets the culture, and seeing the fruit that they've had? That was, if I was going to narrow it down to just one moment, it would be that our best evangelist, one of two, I would say, changed his strategy because of the fruit. And so that to me was very key. What about you, Bob? What's been your experience in this, or what's shaped your convictions along these lines?
Yeah, I think back about our early days in Thailand and remember distinctly the feeling of banging my head against the wall. And that tends to open you up to other ideas, other approaches when you feel like you're banging your head against the wall. I remember one day riding in the taxi, and we oftentimes shared our faith. And we tried to share with everybody, but with taxi drivers. And I remember feeling like I reached a point where I could really fluently share the gospel in Thai, and I'm praying and I'm sharing the best I think I've ever shared, and finish sharing some testimony in the gospel. And I'm waiting for this taxi driver to respond, and he responds and he says, "Buddy, sasana tuk sasana son hai kon bin kon di," which translates to, "Oh, that's great. Religion, all religions teach people to do good, so all religions are good." And I just thought, oh, it's just water off a duck's back. That just made absolutely no impression on him whatsoever. I started realizing that my skin color was working against me. My nationality was working against me. There were a lot of things where I was just written off and really not listened to when it came to sharing my faith with national believers. At the same time, when I would come and talk to believers, they thought, oh, you're from a Christian country. You've probably had more training, more Bible, more experience. We want to listen to you and hear what you have to say. And so I realized I was playing into my weaknesses instead of playing into my strengths. I could go where I had influence and encourage, hey, why don't we go share our faith together? And I saw lots of people who would have otherwise been on the sidelines get into the game just because I invited them to go meet people together and share their faith together. And so to me, that was a big game changer. I think another thing that dawned on me is that we did have, with Greg and other people on our team and some of the ladies, we had people come to Christ. But I started to observe that those who came to Christ were people who in Thai society oftentimes were isolated. They needed a friend, and so they gravitated toward the foreigner. And so once they came to Christ, they're wonderful people, but they really weren't people who could immediately turn around because they were isolated and start influencing and leading others to Christ. And so it also helped me see that, you know what, if you can find some believers, national believers, who are already influencers and well-connected, and help them move forward in ministry more successfully because you're supporting and encouraging and cheering on and whatever's necessary, that might really be a better strategy. So I would say that's my journey and how I came to view cross-cultural work a little differently, and at least what's needed today. And so even with that, I see people today entering the field and making the same kind of mistakes we made of ignoring the local church and just doing it themselves. And Greg, I wonder, do you have any thoughts on why that keeps happening over and over?
Yeah, I think there are many reasons. I think sometimes I've met people who've been commissioned to go do something distinctly reformed, and they can't find someone who does that, or they're going to establish their denomination. But sometimes I think it feels better. You feel like you're in a culture where you feel like you can't do very much. When you're out there doing it, sharing the gospel yourself, you at least feel good about yourself a little bit. Even if it's not very good, you feel like I've tried, I've done something, but it's not very effective, but it feels like you're working. But I think deep down, I think people keep doing it because of pride. And we from the West, it is just so easy for us to come in and think we've got the answer. The people on the field often think they've got the money and they've got more education than we have. And so they must know, and we'll just follow whatever they do. And so they do it themselves because they think their way is right and nobody can do it like they can. So it's a pride thing. I think that's the heart of it.
Well, Scott, I'd love to hear your perspective on this one.
Sure, yeah. And as you mentioned perspective, one of my first thoughts was perspectives, the class. A lot of people get interested in going overseas, reaching the 1040 window or the unreached, thinking of, look, if you want to see people come to Christ, you got to go do the hard thing. You got to go to the front line, and you got to get in this spiritual battle, this war. And so you raise up apostolic or people that are willing to sacrifice and leave everything to go do the front line in the trenches work. But they don't ever say, you know what, you might be, if this is a military context, like you may not be the best frontline worker. You might be good at a quartermaster, or you might be good at logistics. And someone's, wait, what? You want me to give up my office job to go work in an office at some local church's thing? I think the vision that gets cast and what people respond to is very much if this is going to happen, then I'm going to have to partner with God, and it's going to be dependent upon me listening to God, and I got to go do it. And so I think the way we, at least in America, I don't know about other countries, but it seems like in America, we really promote the idea that you are the catalyst. You are the person that's going to make the change. Go. Now, Paul was going to, in a lot of places, temples, Jewish temples. Sometimes that didn't work. He'd go, then he would go out. But that was his first strategy. And I think a lot of people are like, there are no churches. There are no things. But in a lot of places there are. And so I just think it's, how do we promote and recruit people going to missions? We're filtering out people that may be like, no, I'm more of a Jethro to the Moses. Let me be the outsider. He wasn't an Israelite. He was culturally outsider, but he came to the tribe and helped them. And I think we're more like, no, you got to go be the Moses. You're not a Jethro. Or you go be the Paul, not the Barnabas kind of thing. I don't know, Bob. What about you? I mean, you've been doing this for several years with cross-cultural workers. What observations have you made about why the disconnection keeps happening?
Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned perspectives. I think perspectives is great as far as casting a vision of getting out there to the unreached. And they actually have some good messaging on this, but I just don't know that it sinks in with people. You have that they'll talk about mobilizing and trying to get to movement. So they have some good stuff in it. I think what tends to stick are things like missionary biographies. And so you think about missionary biographies you've read, how many of them have been about a missionary who went in where there was some believers that were already there, and they humbled themselves and said, how can we help you succeed and multiply? And no, those biographies, I haven't really seen any. All the ones, are for 200 years stories about how the missionary went in and there was nothing and they had to translate the Bible and share their faith from scratch. And so you have these mental pictures of what a cross-cultural worker is supposed to do from the stories that you've heard and read. And so if you're listening today and you like to write, please write some new biographies. Please write some biographies and tell some stories of missionaries today, contemporary, who went in as servants and were humble and came alongside and even under nationals and saw God, because it happens every day that way. And this is paying off. This is paying fruit in that way. So I think it's what stories have we heard and been told, and we need to tell some new stories.
Yeah, I agree. There's just not as many pioneering places in the world today. There's still unreached people groups for sure, but I think there's always someone closer to that people group than us that could go into that people group and reach them easier than we could.
Yeah. And a lot of times they're living right next to each other.
Yeah.
I think going back to why people will go in and not work with national believers, I've heard ministry workers say, oh, you can't work with the national church. They're just not healthy. They're sick. And at the same time, I've seen others, while they were discounting it, I've seen others who went with a good, humble approach and had famous success with it. And so I think we're too quick to write off the possibility of working alongside and with local believers. So, Greg, you've had some success with this, and I'm curious to what you think is the right posture or attitude for missionaries to have as they desire to be used as a catalyst and to see unreached peoples come to Christ.
Yeah, I think probably the most important character trait that we need to model is humility. And just like Jesus did, he humbled himself and made himself a servant. And I think when we go in with that posture, it's going to be welcomed a lot better than someone who comes and knows it all. I think no matter how long you've been there, I've been in Thailand for 35 years. I'm always a guest. I'm a foreigner. And if someone comes into your house and they say, hey, you should move that furniture, why don't you rearrange your house? That would be offensive. And in the Asian context, in Thailand, when a missionary walks in the room, there's already a power dynamic going on. They think, okay, first of all, there's a lot of respect because they've all come to Christ through missionaries in the past. So they honor you more than you deserve, actually, just because you're there in their country. And then you probably got more money, maybe more education. They want to hear what you've got to say. But I think if we just humble ourselves and ask questions more, say, what do you think about it? What's working? Almost that coach approach to trying to say, I've never lived here. I have no idea what your country's, what works best or how God's working. And learner mentality, just continue to learn. Even now, I learn things about Thai culture that I didn't know before. And I think if we go in with that posture of learning, wanting to understand and wanting to serve, I think that's huge. That will open doors that are very difficult to open most of the time.
Yeah. You talk about learning, being humble and learning. I think about what we learned, for example, from a Thai leader named John Nantachai. I remember when he shared, he said, Bob, Thais are more affective than they are cognitive.
Yeah.
And just when that soaked in, and I realized, we've been approaching them with a cognitive type approach. Flip that on its head and start with trying to see their hearts touched before we try to see their heads touched. And that changed how we approached them. And we saw a lot more fruit because we learned from a national leader. Boy, I wish we'd learned earlier. But I'm thinking at the same time now to some of our listeners who are like, that's great, but we're walking on the beach where there's no footprints ahead of us. We're trying to reach people who there's just no one around whatsoever. And so what about that circumstance, they might say. And so what thoughts do you guys have for someone who feels like, yeah, that's all great, but I'm going to where it's just really unreached?
I think if you're going, it depends if you're talking about someone in a different country or just a different part of an area, but I would say near culture would be the next, strategically thinking, probably the next level of, hey, maybe I'm supposed to go to country X, but would it be more strategic to go to country Y first, mobilize people that speak that language, it's very similar culture, or at least a much closer culture. And then what if I just stay in country Y and mobilize or take short-term teams into X and help them kind of do the 2x2s in going to the cities and dusting off their sandals if nobody responds. So I think if there aren't any footprints in the place you're feeling called to engage, maybe it's to send people out ahead of you or you don't even go, but you're mobilizing near culture people.
So, Scott, I remember one day you were telling me that y'all discovered through some research that if a believer from a nearby country that was closer culturally came and joined a Western team, that it seemed like the team was much more effective. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, so some research was done, and what we found was from this other country where there was a CBB, a Christian background believer, if they were mobilized and joined a Western team in our country, just their presence on the team and their ability to influence the thinking of the group to think, wait a minute, that's the culture here is going to receive it this way if you say it that way. And it's just their advantage or their benefit of just knowing how the locals will receive the way you say something caused the way a lot of teams redo their EV or discipleship strategy that caused them to be significantly more effective than an all-Western team.
Oh, that's good. So it's not just that they're more effective doing the work. You're saying they're actually helping the Westerners know how to do the work better. Really
Exactly.
good.
Exactly. Still predominantly Western teams, Western teammates. The issue was not necessarily that the CBB from another nearby culture was more effective. They are. But just their presence on the team made the Westerners significantly more effective than a purely Western team. And so they listened to their local CBB friend and understanding culture in a different way.
That's really good.
I would say we saw that in Thailand as well. When we had Thais on our staff, we became more effective. And then we mobilized one to Cambodia, who went to a tribal group there who had incredible success, which was really neat.
Yeah, that's good. So, Greg, I want to come back to you and I'm wondering what practical steps that a foreigner can take to build trust, because I think you've done a really great job building trust with national leaders. And so what practical steps would you suggest as a part of that?
I think in the Asian culture, relationships is everything. And spending time with leaders, having coffee, listening to their story, getting to know them, their heart, their understanding their challenges, their vision, and not even offering suggestions, just listening and saying, amen, man, I'm with you on that. And then I think so just over time, spending time with the person, they see that you genuinely care about them. You're not trying to use them to accomplish your goal. I think that's communicated. And then this is a hard one nowadays, but very few people seem to stay more than 3 or 4 years overseas. And the nationals see that. And so they don't know if they're wasting their time with you. I think the longevity builds trust. And I would say you build trust over time and you can lose it really fast, really just like any pastor can here in the States. But I think time is a big factor in building trust. If they see your faithfulness, they see your support, they see your love for them, that's huge.
What have you observed, Scott?
Greg, it's like you're reading my notes. I was going to say it takes lots and lots of time, and I also agree wholeheartedly that, and I'm in a city where there's a lot of good language schools. There's a lot of people that will come for 2 years, maybe 2.5 or 3 to learn language, and then they go somewhere else. So I don't want to call it missionary attrition. Some of it's attrition, but some of it's just turnover because we have a lot of people in this city and then going other places. Like you said, the locals, especially if they're churches, they're so used to seeing people come in and then leave. And we're dealing with people that in the churches, they're not just churches have been 200 or 300 years. They're going to say, we were here before Islam, where our tribe did not convert. So we've suffered oppression and persecution for 1,400 years. And that's their roots. And then here you are, some outsider, and you're trying to get them to think your way or do stuff. And I don't even know if you're going to be here in 36 months. This tribe, we've been here for 1,400 years. You really got to build a relationship, and it takes time and loving them well in that process.
Yeah.
What about you, Bob? What practices have you seen that help earn trust with local leaders?
Yeah. And I don't know if I have anything new or different to add than what you guys have. Maybe just tell a story. This is powerful. I remember going to the south of Thailand and talking with a pastor who wanted to see some other churches planted, and he wanted to see his church grow, and really great stuff that showed that he truly had a heart and a vision for reaching the lost for Christ and reaching unreached people groups around him even. After asking those questions, just listened, I said, well, how could we help you succeed in those goals? And he said, he kind of gave a real short answer, but he came back to me the next day and he said, John Bob, I haven't been able to quit thinking about the question you asked me about how you could help us succeed at our goals. He said, you're the first foreigner who's ever asked me that question. Everybody comes into town and they want us to help them do their thing. You're the first one that's ever asked how you could help us succeed. And again, I didn't start off that smart knowing that. I learned that over time. That's the attitude and the heart posture we need to have. And again, I had already listened, asking him that what his vision was, because I don't want to make that commitment and that offer to somebody who has no vision, who has a different vision than I have. I want to make that offer and ask that question to people who I can see that, wow, this would be worthwhile to invest in serving and helping this person. But I think what that really showed me when I lay that alongside a recent conversation I had with another leader in that country, a foreign leader who was a regional leader who said, you can't work with the local church. It's just a no-go. And then here it was. No wonder. It explained a lot, because it usually goes back to what posture are you approaching with? And so that's just to illustrate, I think, what we've all been saying. But I would love to hear from you, Greg. What approaches have you seen work well in partnership, and maybe some mess ups? What things have you seen damage relationships with national leaders?
Yeah, I go back to what I said at the beginning, when I love my organization, Mesa Global, because that is what we do, is we try to come alongside the nationals. We don't want to have Mesa Global established in Thailand we just want to help the nationals. And it's funny what you're talking about there. They use the word agenda, because they've run into so many people who have their own agenda. I remember that Thai pastor or that seminary guy, it was the head of the Evangelical Fellowship of Thailand, said, so what does your organization want you to do? What's your agenda? And I said, they want me to help you. And he was like, no, but what do they really want you to do? And they've gotten so used to the Westerner coming in with their agenda to use them to accomplish their vision that it's wow. So I think coming in with your agenda is a trust breaker. And I think you have to lay some of those things down. I would say something else that I've changed. I don't know if this is faulty or just the way missions has evolved. I would say if you look at Paul and what he did, he went to major cities. He went to ports, places of commerce and influence. And I think so many times missionaries want to go to the tribals. They want to go to the villages where there's no one there, or they think there's no one there. And we discovered in Thailand that 42% of all the Christians are tribals. There's 40 different languages spoken and tribes. And the missionaries went to those villages first, the ends of the earth, and did the hard work. But the problem is those people cannot reach the ethnic Thai people. And so now you have a group of people who would have to become missionaries themselves to learn Thai better, to dress differently, to culturally different. And so I think going to the city is a very important part of strategy, and not going to a village. Maybe it's necessary, but like the near culture thing you're saying there, Scott, it's like, I think if you reach a city, you can reach the whole country, because especially now, everyone's coming into the city. I remember I was riding on the SkyTrain one day into Bangkok and just visualizing, it was early in the morning and everybody's coming into the city. And then at night, everybody goes out. And I visualized it like a heartbeat. Every day, the blood comes in and the blood goes out, and it goes out all over the country. And see, if we can reach the heart and the head of this country, we can reach the whole nation. But the missionaries in the past had gone to the villages so much that it's kind of left the church there stunted in a sense. They can't reach their own ethnic people. And so now it's changed. People are coming to the cities more, and then people from the city will go out and reach their, how it is in Bangkok, Bob. No, everyone says, oh, I'm not from Bangkok. I'm from some other province. And they don't want to claim Bangkok, but they could go back and reach their province so much easier than if a foreigner went into that. So that's just a strategy approach.
Yeah, we need to ask those questions and think about, how do we build up and reach people who can then turn around and reach others who can reach others. So
can I add something to that? I
Sure.
think something that's been very damaging to nationals, I know in Thailand, is that when a mission agency comes in, they find a good guy and then they hire that guy
yeah,
for $100 more a month than their own church can pay them. We could pay them more. He's a great guy. He seems dissatisfied. And so you shepherd steal. You're not sheep stealing, you're shepherd stealing.
Yeah.
It took these people 15 years to
That
grow
really
this
hurts.
leader. Oh man, I've seen so many missionaries come in and do that. Sometimes it's because they want to have their campus in Thailand. This church in America was to have an international campus in Bangkok, Thailand, and they hire this guy, pay him a little more, and he'll go. He may need more money for his family or whatever. And so it's hugely damaging to the missionary work on the field.
yeah. So
Destroys trust.
don't go in and shepherd steal and call it partnering.
Right.
No, it's not. Good. Scott, have you seen any mistakes that you would caution us against?
Yeah, I have several that come to mind, and one of mine were financial issues, not just the shepherd stealing, as you mentioned, Greg. The financial issues go deeper than shepherd stealing. I've seen a couple of cases just where the local pastor, because of nepotism, a lot of people on the elders of the church or family members, and I don't want to call it a racket, but I've seen some local pastors or families in a church get rich from short-term teams, because maybe they'll bring them in and they'll charge $2,500 to each person that's an expat, but it only costs them $750. So they're making good money. And we had one guy, not we, but there was one person that got kicked out of the country. Well, he didn't get kicked out. He was going to get all his assets were taken from him by the government because he was basically taking money from the church and putting it in his name. So it's just messy with the financial issue. So I'd say be very careful when you're bringing money in to try to help locals advance the kingdom. I think the other big thing, maybe even bigger than money, is understanding cultural issues. The West, we tend to be more guilt, innocence oriented, but understanding shame, honor, and fear, power dynamics as they may play in the context of the local partners you're dealing with, I think is huge. I've seen Westerners say they want to come alongside, they want to partner, they want to be humble, they want to serve. And then because they've had training or whatever, the pastor says, we want to do this. And the missionary may be on the church staff or something like that. And they'll speak up because they come from the West where everybody gets to share their opinion. If you just went against what the senior pastor said, you just shamed him. Now, how's he going to deal with that? Because you're supposedly the outsider, but you didn't support him. So it gets messy and you can create relational problems without even just trying to have a good heart. And so really understanding shame, honor, fear, power dynamics in the relationship with the people you partner with. And just go slow. Like I would almost say, come to the country or near country, learn your language, 2 years to learn your language, but also spend that time investigating different options of who to partner with. Because the first local partner that might look like the best option, you may realize after 2 years, actually, no, they're just in it for the money, or wow, they've got a bad reputation amongst other local believers, and that's going to hurt our relationship. So, I would just say those are a couple of key things. Financial issues, go slow, learn your shame, honor, fear, power dynamics. Bob?
That's good.
Bob, what's a cautionary lesson or tale that you've learned regarding partnering with locals?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with what you said about money. You have to be careful bringing money into the equation. How many times have we heard these fantastic numbers of churches planted and baptisms and all that are reported back from national partners who have been paid to produce? And they don't want to shame. There's so many reasons to be super cautious with the whole money thing. And I think, Greg, one of the good things you've done is you were able to find some people who were already taking care of themselves financially, and you were able to partner with them without having to bring money in most of the cases. I think that's really good.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I would say is we're talking about dangers and all this. I got to come back to our own hearts, because all along the way, as we're trying to partner and you're trying to have a posture of helping other people be successful, there's the constant temptation of, I want things my way. When do you go through a day and not want things your way, or at least some credit or whatever? And I just keep coming back to the importance of guarding our own hearts. I think about a letter I received when I was first on the field from a mentor of mine who closed the letter out by signing, putting a little quote down at the bottom that said, "The world has not yet seen what God can do through one man who doesn't care who gets the glory." And so I think that's what we're talking about, is having a posture of not caring who gets the glory and being willing to serve those and be like John the Baptist that says to Jesus must become greater, I must become less. And it's not about what you and what you do, but it's about helping other people succeed. We've talked about some failures or mistakes to avoid. I would love to hear if you guys have a success story or two that you've seen, but would love to hear some encouragement for our listeners about where the gospel has taken off as this kind of partnership has happened.
Yeah, I would say the first 14 years there in Thailand did our own thing. And then when I did that interview with that Thai pastor, he invited me to come and join the Thailand National Planning Committee and began working with him. And I would say the last 20 years of my work in Thailand were just so exciting because I didn't bear the whole burden of the vision and the finances and all this. The Thais, it was their vision. I just came alongside and helped them. You know, we would say, what do you need? Do you need a team? Do you need, what kind of tool do you need? Do you need training? Do you need treasure? Some treasure. And like you said, it is messy with the money sometimes. You have to be careful. I like George Verwer's book. I don't know if he's the head, he started Operation Mobilization. He calls it messiology. It's very messy. But I worked with those leaders, and then through that, I met a Thai business leader who was vice president of the largest full-cycle natural rubber company in the nation. And he said, Greg, I want to start a church over in this part of town. Would you come help me? And it was like, wow. And just got to know him and really felt good. And another missionary was working with him too. And he didn't need my money. He had more money than I did. He drives a Tesla now and a BMW. And so he didn't need my money, but he did need help. He's a full-time business guy. And so for the last 15 years, I've worked alongside him in planting a church that is reaching the influencers. And I would say this is another part of strategy. I think it's the cool thing to do now to go work with people in the slums or trafficking or prostitutes. And he told me, he said, all the missionaries that want to come to Thailand, they want to work with the poor, want the prostitutes or the tribals. Nobody wants to work with people like me. He said, the business people need Christ just as much. And I was like, wow, okay. So I worked with him, and our church has the Queen's Heart Doctor. We have lawyers. We have people who work for, they have one guy in quantum physics, and he's reaching influencers. And I think, wow. And this is something I've changed over the years of just go wherever God leads you. Yes. But I think, like I said, not only the city, but who are the influencers in the city that God is working in their hearts? And it was so exciting to be a part of that, just to walk alongside him and to reach influencers, because when he says God's changed my life, he was addicted to gambling and girls and all kinds of, he said, when he tells people that, they go, wow, what do you mean? Tell me about it. Or when the Queen's Heart Doctor says God changed my life, their influence and their impact is so great. Now, that doesn't mean it's an either or. Let's go work with the prostitutes or the business people. I think it's not an either or, but I do think you can mobilize those people who are independent already to go help those other people, the nationals, without the foreigners going and creating huge dependencies, trying to reach the tribals or the prostitutes or the poor on their own, without a national church really engaged in owning that vision already. And so that's been so exciting to me to see God work through influencers. And that's what Tim Keller, go into a city, plant churches, try to reach the cultural influencers, and you will see change happen. So that's something that I've been just really blessed to be a part of in the last 15 years of helping influencers reach their own people in the country for the sake of the entire nation.
Yeah. And so you've been helping plant this larger urban type church, but you've also been involved simultaneously in training church planters
right.
to reproduce and multiply that in other areas.
Yeah, through City to City, Mesa Global's partnered with City to City. And so I'm right now coaching 6 Thais here from America who are planting churches in Thailand. We need to know how to leverage what God has given us for the maximum impact on the field.
Yeah, it's not either or.
Right.
Scott, any thoughts on or stories you could share?
Yeah, I don't have any great success stories, at least from our region. There is one country in the region where to change religions is not an issue. I've noticed if it gets to 60 to 80 people, it's like group dynamics change. I don't know if you study group dynamics, but there is this size thing. Something happens, and it seems like if you get a group if you get something happening that's that fruitful, is at that range, the government or the local leaders, officials, maybe they're not government, but they're other religious leaders. And that's when you start seeing the crackdown and the persecution. And it seems like that's the largest bit of fruit we've had in partnering with a local fellowship. We've had people do the other route. I'm just going to go straight to them. But even in that, it's been largely refugees whose lives have been turned over and they're in a different country or a different part of their country. So internally displaced peoples. But yeah, so it's not, and it's just maybe the type of soil, the context we're dealing with in this region would be different than a lot of other places.
Yeah. And so now I'd love to turn and kind of look at the team leader. What role does the team leader play in helping the team to identify a strategy and to fine-tune the strategy? Because as we're speaking to team leaders in the Field Leaders podcast, what kind of direction could we point them in as they're engaging their teams over their strategy?
I think the role of the team leader is to have a clear vision for what they want the team to do and to set the strategy for how that's going to be done. It doesn't mean that everyone has to be doing the exact same thing. It was really sweet for us, Bob, when we first went. Everyone had the same background in campus ministry. We came from the same denominational perspective. But I think if you have a more diverse team, it needs to be clear. And this is challenging. We know the number one reason missionaries leave the mission field is because they can't get along with other missionaries. And so I think, yes, the team leader needs to be engaged on the ground some, but he needs to be really taking care of his missionaries and resolving conflicts, helping them when they're struggling, temptations, all different things that the team is going to run into. And then in investigation, I think if they're just going to the field, just investigating, and I know we did that, Bob. We went out to different campuses, but wherever you are, just take a long time, get to know what God is already doing where you're going. Even if there's no Christians there, God's at work there, right? He's at work and he's doing something.
Yeah, Bob, and I would say, I don't know about this specific issue of partnering with locals, but I think the role of a team leader in any context is, one key thing is just recruiting the right people. I already mentioned Western teams that bring on a couple of near culture, man, it can really increase your effectiveness. So I think multicultural teams, they tend to struggle more. If you think of Tuckman's model of forming, storming, norming, and performing, it takes longer. They'll storm more. Multicultural team will storm more, and it takes longer to get to norming stage. But when they get to performing stage, they will typically outperform monocultural teams. The monocultural teams will get through that process quicker, but they will be outperformed by the multicultural teams. So I would think recruiting the right people. This isn't a missions book. It's actually a business book. I think he's a Harvard professor. This is from the 90s. J.R. Hackman wrote a book called Leading Teams and talking about the 5 conditions for effective teams. And so his 5 things are: have a real team, which is defining who's on the team, who's not; compelling direction, or is what Greg said, setting clear direction; having enabling structures. So do you have the things in place to make it, do you have what you need to get the job done? And then a supportive organizational context, because if you're out there doing the work and you don't have support from your sending group, or if you're trying to partner with a local agency or ministry and they're not really behind you, it's not going to work. And then the last thing he said is outside expert coaching. It's like you need to get on the field, but you need to have someone who's can see the forest for the trees because they're back away to come in periodically and help. I would say that's also key. And then as Greg said, he talked about the main thing is taking care of your staff. I'm a big fan of the lead, develop, care model, which was originally called the shepherd model. It's about how do you lead your staff well? And if you take care of them, then they can last and persevere. So that's kind of it doesn't apply necessarily to this specific topic, but it will apply to how you relate to locals if you do this well, both with your expat staff and if you have national staff or national partners. So you learn how to balance relationship and task in a healthy way.
Yeah.
I would say one more thing about team versus community. Like we got to a point at one point and we said, we really are not a team. We're more of a community. And so we need to function differently because this person's working in this kind of thing. This person's doing this. And we really weren't all working toward the same goal. And so it was like just saying, okay, we're not a team, we're a community.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be different in how you lead that group, for sure.
Yeah, wholeheartedly.
Yeah. You're speaking now of your later time on the field.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. I think when I'm thinking about the team leader and strategy, I think the team leader is responsible to help make sure that there is effective strategy and that everybody on the team is clear about that strategy, what it is and how you're going about it. I don't believe it's the team leader's responsibility necessarily to single-handedly say, this is the strategy, right? I think the team leader, if he or she is smart, is tapping into everybody's insights and getting everybody involved in the process of evaluating current strategy, trying to figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work, going out asking questions of national partners and learning and bringing that back. And again, just wanted to point out, it doesn't have to be kind of an authoritative, I'm the only person who's setting, no, but you are responsible to see to it that the strategy is actually working and that everybody's clear on it. If there's some division on it, then the leader may need to step in and say, all right, here's what may need to come in and settle. But that's probably rare. That needs to happen. And so team leaders, I would ask you, evaluate your team. Do you guys have an effective strategy? And is everybody clear on it and knowing what to do next? Let's move toward wrapping up here. And so we want to look back just a little bit. And Greg, we like to ask all of our guests, if you could give your younger self some advice in ministry, what would you suggest to younger Greg 35 years ago?
Yeah, I think I would go take longer in learning from the culture, the language, and what God is already doing in the nation. Take it as long as maybe the first term to really build relationships and understand. Like you mentioned earlier, Scott, I met one missionary. He got there. He's like, I've got this great guy. And I said, who is it? He told me, it's like, I'm really sorry, but that's probably the worst person that you could be working with. Yeah. He's really a bad guy. I think you have to take time. You have to understand the context, learn the culture. I think look for leaders that God is using in a powerful way in that country that are trustworthy leaders. That's huge. If God's at work, there's a reason he's at work through that man. And maybe that's, it almost look like, this is a funny analogy, but it's if you're going to invest your money in something, would you invest in this new startup? Or would you just go ahead and put your money in Google or Apple or something that's proven and that's growing exponentially now? And not to make it too business-like, but we want to be smart in who we invest our time with. And I think sometimes we get attached to people that are not going to be fruitful. They may pray to receive Christ with us and they're really excited. And really what they're actually after is a trip to America. They're not really interested in Jesus. So I think take time to get to know your context better. I think we all come over with a denominational blinders. And I think the body of Christ is so much larger than what we've experienced in our own denomination or our own theological belief.
Yeah.
Those are a few things, that I would given my younger self some advice with.
Good. Do you guys think this is going to become even more important in the future, this idea of going in and working alongside or under nationals to help them succeed? Is that something that is going to become less important in the future or more important in the future?
I think it's more important. I can't remember who wrote the book called The Facilitator Era. And we are not in a pioneering era any longer. We're in a place, and the West, the global church is changing to the global South. And I think we don't have as much influence, or God's using people from everywhere. And I think for us to come in as if we've got the answers and we know is we can't do that any longer. And we shouldn't have done it in the first place, probably. But I think, yeah, being a facilitator, coming alongside where God's already at work, what can I do to fan this flame even more so that the gospel is made known? And I believe God is going to use the nationals to reach a country, not the missionaries. God's going to get the glory, but I want the nationals to get the glory, and I believe God's going to use them more effectively. So,
yeah, I agree. I think more and more there's going to be opportunities to engage, not just near culture, but actually in culture people. As I mentioned earlier, there's a story about the guy that will go out and talk to anybody, and there's no one left, he'll talk to a telephone pole. They've done, I don't know if it's Google ads or Facebook ads about, hey, have you had a dream or vision of a man in white? They've had these different things. And through that, they've gotten connected to people in countries we can't get into. And they've been able to disciple them online, and they'll fly them to sometimes they'll try to bring them to our country. Sometimes they can't get into this country, so they'll go to a third country and they'll say, hey, we'll pay you fly to this city. We'll meet you for a week and let's do life on life. And 1 to 2 weeks, we'll go out and do EV together if you want to. They're reaching villages in war-torn places that no Westerner could go, and the gospel's being advanced because of the advantage of finding people that are already out there through the internet and then working with them and building a relationship with them online, but also really trying to get them in person at time to really love on them and bless them and shepherd. So I think, yeah, trying to skip being I'm the frontline guy in the trenches in our region at least.
Yeah. And Lord willing, the church will continue to grow, and there will be more and more proximate believers, more and more small churches within unreached people groups that can be supported, that can be mobilized, that can be equipped, can be served. And I think as we close today, my word of encouragement to the leaders that are listening is don't give up too quickly. Don't give up too quickly on trying to serve and help lift up the local Pauls in your area. And you may have had a hard time at first, and it may seem like it won't work, but I pray that God will give you wisdom about how to re-engage, and that God will touch the hearts of nationals to work with you as you humbly engage with. So Greg and Scott, thank you guys so much for your time today. It's really been a good one to do with you, and I'm excited to get it out where people can hear it.
Thank you for the privilege of being here.
Thanks for joining us, Greg. It's great to see you again, and really a blessing to hear how God's been able to use you and help refine your strategy over the years. I just pray that our listeners are able to glean what they need from this to be more fruitful and effective at whatever God's called them to. So thanks for joining us.
Amen.
That's it for today. This has been the Field Leaders Podcast, a part of the Missio Nexus Podcast Network. Leaders, you are not alone. We are here to help you learn, grow, connect, and collaborate. God bless.
Daddy,